Welcome to the Review Lounge. I am your host, Jay.
I'm Jen.
And on this week's episode, we are talking about the Amazon Prime exclusive show, Carnival Row, starring Orlando Bloom and Cara Delevingne.
Very good.
So, let's get right to it. All right, so let's get right down to it. We are talking about Carnival Row. It is another Amazon Prime exclusive show.
American web TV series.
An American web TV series. It is a co-production between Amazon Prime
and Legendary
TV, which is obviously a subsidiary of Legendary Films, who have put out the Godzilla King of the Monsters as well as other films. So apparently they're getting in the TV game. But this is an exclusive for Amazon Prime. So why don't you tell us what you found in your research about the show?
Well, we didn't come across this one by accident. I know we've said that a couple of times before, but you know, we were flipping through and I'm like, oh, Carnival Row. Carnival Row, let's watch this. And then days go by, you don't, and then all of a sudden we do, and we found a gem. I think both of us can agree that it was. We didn't know quite what to expect. It's a fantasy show. It's a mythical show. Lots of mythical creatures, fairies, centaurs. I don't know if they're actually called pucks, but
in the show, the slang term that's used for them is
a puck. It's like a ram, a walking. It's a humanoid.
They would be the
ram.
equivalent of the mythological satire or satire. Satyr.
Satyr.
Yeah, satyr.
Yes.
Satyr.
Yes, but there's all kinds of mythical creatures, and it all takes place, I believe, according to one of the characters, the 7th century.
Yes, which causes me to question whether or not this is Earth. Okay, just to take it back to give people some context. The show the main story is this like sort of crime drama. There's these murders that are happening of the Fae folk, which are these centaurs, fairies, pixies. Any mythical creature. Because you have kobolds, you have the satyr, you have centaurs, you have fairies/pixies. And so the main focus of the show is this sort of crime drama, because there's been these murders that happen that are recurring every 3 weeks of Fae folk. And so the main character, Orlando Bloom, is an investigator trying to figure out what's going on. That's the main thing. Now, where it is set is called the Burg.
Correct.
Which is it's identical to what I would consider to be Victorian England.
Yeah.
It looks like Victorian London.
In the 1800s. Like the
late 1800s London is the way it's set. However, one of the characters does mention in the series that they are in the 7th century. So, which causes me to question whether or not this is even supposed to be Earth or an alternate timeline.
They never really say.
Or an alternate universe.
Yeah.
They don't really say.
They don't.
And so that was kind of like left up in the air. So, take it for what it's worth. But go ahead, continue.
That's okay. The premise of this is these mythical creatures are all immigrants. They come from Termina. They come from a couple of other places that they don't really maybe mention once. But there were several battles, long wars, and they were forced to flee their respective homes and come to the Burg, which is inhabited mostly by humans, and they don't coexist at all. They are considered lesser beings by the humans, and the whole premise of the series so far is them not being able to coexist.
Right. Well, and to piggyback off of that, some of the backstory. Apparently, there was this land of Termina, which, if anybody knows, is a Celtic mythological place. It's part of the Celtic mythology.
Correct.
It's the land of Termina. and you'd still find references to that mythology in modern Irish and Scottish, legends. The land of Tir na Nog. So apparently, this land of Tir na Nog existed, and in the show, and there was these two human lands. The one human land was known as the Pact, and the other human land was known as the Burg. And apparently, the Pact and the Burg went to war, and eventually the war ended up being fought in Tir na Nog, which causes all these refugees of the inhabitants of Tir na Nog,
Correct.
which are the fairies, pixies, kobolds, centaurs, satyr. The fae folk is how they're referred.
Yeah.
Now, even though the Burg are kind of implied to have been the good guys, because they didn't invade Tir na Nog, the Pact invaded Tir na Nog. The Burg sort of went there to defend Tir na Nog with the fae folk against the Pact, but apparently they had to retreat.
Correct.
Because the Pact was too strong, and apparently the Pact is pretty jacked up, and they just kill fae folk almost like for sport.
Yeah.
Now, the refugees go to the Burg. The fae folk refugees from Tir na Nog go to the Burg, and the Burg is filled with its own. It's got its own prejudices and xenophobia, and for lack of a better term, subtle racism going on. There are people that don't want the fae folk there. The fae folk are treated like second-class citizens. They are. The show draws a lot of parallels with 1800s London and how foreigners were treated, how the Irish, the Scottish, black or Asians were treated in 1800s London or even 1800s America. You were fine as long as you knew your place. And that's sort of how the fae folk are treated in the show. There is very, very overt discrimination against them and sort of racism.
Well, they're it's to the point where they're not able to live. They're basically under the thumb and rule of these humans, and they're forbidden to fly. The fairies aren't allowed to fly. They have to wear these special jackets that hold their wings down in the back. It's against the law to fly. So anything and everything to make their lives miserable, they do to them.
Right.
But the flip side of that is there are these murders happening. Orlando Bloom's character is Philo. His name is, they have really weird names in this show. Rycroft Philostrate is his whole name.
Which sounds like something you'd catch.
It sounds like a stomach medicine. But
or some type of ointment you put on your crotch if you've had a really bad experience.
But
in
they
Singapore.
call him Philo for short, which fits him just great, And he did fight in the war. He's a veteran of fighting in the wars, and he became a detective in the local police force there, the human police. And not to give too much away, but a lot of obviously he's the main character. The story revolves around him and him trying to figure out the whys.
Right.
And
the
who
and who is committing them.
Exactly. And as it turns out, a lot of it has to do with him.
Right.
So,
and he's also got a history.
He does have a history.
The other main character, which is
Kara.
Vignette. What's her full name? Vignette
Stonemoss.
Vignette Stonemoss, who's played by Cara Delevingne. The joke there is, for the longest time, I said Delevingne until I was corrected.
Okay.
But she's
a fairy.
One of the fairies. She's pixie. And her and Orlando Bloom's character Philo have a previous history from when he was a soldier. They had met and they had a romance and so on and so forth. So it sort of follows them, and eventually they come together in the Burg as Philo is investigating these murders. And again, I don't want to give too much away,
right.
but over the course of the 8 episodes, there's sort of you get the backstory, and then they're sort of on the outs, and then they're cool with each other.
And then they rekindle
and then
things.
They rekindle
and
things, and then it sort of all comes to a head at the end of season 1.
The problem with the whole thing is, as the story progresses, the society as a whole is so intolerable to those kinds of relationships. It's forbidden. Humans can't. I mean, if you're keeping them as a servant, great. In your home, the rich people usually keep the pucks, for the slang, as servants and everything. But it's such an increasingly intolerable society that it's verboten, and
Right. And again, that brings me to the other
which
point.
just brings more stresses.
Now, from a production standpoint, again, Amazon and Legendary TV, obviously they put a good budget for this. Production-wise, it is a good-looking
It's spot
show.
on.
It's
really good.
Like I said, if you didn't know any better, you'd think it was a period piece about 1800s London. Like, they spared no expense. Effects-wise, everything is on point. Everything looks great. The writing is good.
Yeah.
The acting is even better. The story itself is very interesting. It is a very interesting look at intolerance and xenophobia and love and hate, and it's all interwoven really, really well. Now, because I know we've pointed out the woke train before, there is an agenda with this. Make no mistake about it. There is an agenda. There is a message contained within here. However, this is, like we've always said, messages are fine if it's relevant to the story.
Exactly.
And in that sense, the messages that are being conveyed from the writers in this story, it's fine. It's not like agenda driven.
Correct.
The story itself deals with these concepts of intolerance and hatred and love and acceptance and moving past one's differences. And so the fact that those moral implications are there doesn't come across as agenda driven. It comes across as this is integral to the story. So in that sense, it's not like, oh, here's another, Amazon Prime show beating you over the head, with an agenda. No, it's part of the story. It's integral to the story. So while it is there, you don't get distracted by it because it's part of the story. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I just wanted to put that out there.
No, that's fine.
But there's also some other big name people in this.
There are.
There's some people, what's her name?
Indira Varma.
Indira Varma is in it.
Again, she was in something else
She was in
about.
Close.
Yes.
She played,
Yes,
she was in Close. She's in this as well.
She's in a lot of Netflix, Amazon things.
Yes, and she does good.
She does.
She
plays a good bitch.
Yeah, she plays a very good bitch in this show. She's in. Who else was in here?
Jared Harris. You'd know him if you saw him. He was in the Sherlock Holmes movies.
Yes.
He played Professor Moriarty in Sherlock Holmes. And come to find out through my research, he is the son of veteran actor Richard Harris. I had no idea he was Richard Harris's son. Now we know. I learned something new today. But yes, we have Orlando Bloom, who we all know and love. And I was reading an article when I was doing my research on this, and he said, since he's very familiar with doing mystical fantasy movies, Legolas, he said he produced this.
Yeah, he was a producer on it.
Series. He was the executive producer of the show. So thank you. But he said, it's very interesting to have such a deep-hearted character, where he was born, without giving things away, he was born, raised in an orphanage. When he was old enough, he went out on the street, joined the military, did all that. came home as a veteran, joined the police force. So it sounds very similar to the things that people do today.
Right.
Which I thought was really cool. And he said that's what attracted him to the part was the what goes on in the psyche of a man who goes through all that.
Yeah, definitely. It's an interesting, like I said, it's an interesting take. This show, and as we were, discussing what we were going to talk about, and I kind of pointed out, this show does something that the only other show I've seen do it was Game of Thrones, and that is for all of the fae folk, the pixies, kobolds, centaurs, satyrs, whatever. They don't overdo it with that. It rides that fine line between what you would just consider a period piece, turn of the century London, and then you have this sort of fantasy element, and they find that right mix. They find that sweet spot where it's not just this period piece on turn of the century London. And it's not like this overly fantasy, pixies and fairies and whatnot. They find that sweet spot so that it's
the niche.
It's there. It's there, but it doesn't one doesn't overpower the other. Right. The same way, like I said, to use a point of reference, Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones could have just been seen as medieval kingdoms, and everyone jockeying for power and the whole court system, and when I say court, I mean like the king's court, and everyone jockeying for power and the intrigue and that. But then you also had White Walkers and dragons, and so on and so. And it managed to find that sweet spot between having that fantasy element and yet having that grounded in reality element. And so they kind of balanced each other out. This does the same thing.
It does.
It doesn't, you don't get wrapped up in the fantasy side of it. You don't get wrapped up in the
human side,
the human, turn of the century cop drama side of it. You sort of ride the line between both. And I like that. Yeah. I like that neither aspect of it overpowered the other. So, yeah. So what else did you got there?
I think that one of the most important things that you would get from this show, if you're into the fantasy, mythical creatures, that kind of thing, is that it always leaves you asking another question. It says, oh, okay, well, there's something small that's discovered and figured out here, but then, oh, wait, there's more. And I think that there's never a dull moment. There's always a constant build to something.
True.
You know what I mean? And I think anyone who enjoys a good murder mystery, but at the same time it has a mystical fantasy angle to it, it adds another level of intrigue, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, and the writing was good.
The writing was really good.
It's 8 episodes.
Yeah.
8 episodes in season 1, and when you finally get to the climax of all the stories in episode 8, I like the way they. Just when you think you figured it out, what was going on in the story, you were shown something that like, nope, you're wrong, and then you're like, oh, okay, that makes, and then they flip it again, and they're like, no, you're still wrong, and you're just like, holy crap, like this is multi-layered like intrigue going on here. So it was done really well. I like that they don't shy away from the sex and the violence.
No, they don't.
Well, much like previous Amazon Prime shows, like The Boys and stuff like that, they
went all out.
They don't have to pull back from that stuff, and they don't.
No holds barred.
I like that aspect of it.
It makes it more human.
My one criticism would be that there's one storyline that takes place.
I knew you were going to bring that up.
Between this character Ezra.
Imogen.
And his sister Imogen. And they're sort of well-to-do folk. Human. And they have this new neighbor who's also well-to-do, who turns out to be Puck, Puck, which is one of the satyr type characters with the ram's horns.
The ram's horns and the ram's legs.
And it sort of takes this sort of guess who's coming to dinner, because initially they meet and there's sort of like this, oh my God, he's a Puck in our neighborhood, But then due to financial circumstances, the sister Imogen decides to see if she can work out some type of deal with him so that she can get some money to keep them from losing their home. and the two of them grow closer, and before you know it, they end up in bed together, and
You just gave away one of the storylines.
listen, that's my criticism of that storyline, is that you can see it coming a mile away.
Okay.
That was my problem
Okay.
with it. By episode 2, I had turned to you and I said, I hope they don't play it out like this, because that would just be lazy writing. And they did. And that's my only criticism, is that one particular, it seemed like the more they put more detail into the main story with Philo and Vignette, Elena Bloom and Kara's character, it seems like they had to sort of not pay as much attention to these other stories that were going on. And that one, I was a little bit bothered, because it's an 8-episode series, but by episode 2, I had already called how that one was going to play. I literally sat there and said, I hope they don't do this, because that would just be too cliched. That would just be too lazy writing. And sure enough, that storyline played out exactly like that. That's my only criticism of the show, was that it just seemed like they spent so much time on the main one, which was great, because you had twist upon twist upon twist, that they sort of just went the standard route with the other story that was going on. And I was kind of like, I kind of saw that come in episode 2. I really didn't need, 6 more episodes of just building to what I knew was already going to happen.
So, season 2. There will be a season 2.
Yes, apparently, whoever at Amazon Prime greenlights these shows, they know their shit. Because The Boys season 2 was greenlit before season 1 even aired. They knew they had something good on their hands, and that's what happened with this, right? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's where you were going,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yes, is that they greenlit season 2 for this before season 1 even aired.
Mm-hmm.
So whoever's doing that job, keep doing what you're doing, because you're good at it. Because you keep coming up with these good shows, and you're greenlighting additional seasons before the first season even airs. And so far, everyone who's watching these shows is like, well, good. So. Yeah,
they have already started shooting season 2. We should see a trailer or preview trailer, the first one around July of 2020, and then rumor has it that the season 2 should be starting in August of 2020. So a little bit of a wait, but if it's good, I'm willing to wait. If it's season 1 is any indication, I think we're in for.
Plus, we'll have season 2 of The Boys, which comes out just prior to that.
Oh, that's right.
Wasn't that June or July?
Yeah.
That season 2 of The Boys.
It was June.
I think it was June. Is going to come out. So by the time we get done,
We have 2. Our summer set.
Yeah. So we got 2. So all right. So that's our review. Overall, I like it. I think it's a really
very,
good show.
very good. Very well done. Very
Original
well acted.
take. Like I said, there's messages in there, but they play into the integral parts of the story.
It's part of the story.
So you're not being beaten over the head with an agenda. You're just being told this story. And I liked it. I thought it was good. Like I said, I liked every aspect of it, other than that one criticism. Otherwise, I thought it was great. I would recommend it. I would definitely tell people to watch it. As a matter of fact, I have actually one of my coworkers. I turned him on to the show. And he actually came back to me the next day and he's like, dude, I watched the first 2 episodes. You're right. It's awesome. So give it a thumbs up. Highly recommend.
Oh, yes.
Yes, thumbs up. Highly recommend.
2 thumbs up.
Yes, so that'll do it for our review of Carnival Row on Amazon Prime. So if you like what we're doing, if you want to hear us talk more crap about more movies, TV shows, and trailers and reactions and stuff like that, remember to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the little bell for the notifications.
Comments.
If you have any thoughts, ideas, questions, or comments, feel free to leave them below, and we will respond. We always do. And let's see what else. You can also, if you want, you can follow us on the Twitter, the Bluebird of the Twitter. You can follow us on Twitter at review_lounge. You can find us on the Book of Faces at the Review Lounge. You can also find us on Reddit at the Review Lounge. And you can email us directly, if you choose to do so, at the Review Lounge Show at gmail.com. So that's how you can find us. So anything else? Anything you wanted to add there?
Nope.
All right. So that'll do it for this episode. Thank you, and if you get a chance, check out Carnival Row. It's a really good show.
It is.
And we will see you on the next one. Until then, I got to do my thing for thing's sake. And no other reason to do it other than like, oh my god, I got my thing. Anyway, we will see you on the next one. On behalf of myself and Jen, peace out.
Bye, guys.